We're not talking about a failure of this bank, but that banks could, fail.
So
That's not off the question.
This is clearly an example of something breaking. We can assume that there's serious contagion here.
The biggest bank collapse since the 2008 financial crisis, and it shut down today. It's called Silicon Valley Bank, and it is one of the tech industry's largest lenders, also lends to individuals across the country. It is now under control of the federal government. It was a sudden implosion, and it came after a run on deposits. So the bank stock lost 80% of its value this week, 60% in one day alone, yesterday. This morning, shares halted. It was over quickly. And then police showed up at the bank headquarters in California today. You're looking at that here. Customers reportedly even lined up at a bank branch on Park Avenue in New York City. The NYPD showed up there. Those customers demanding their deposits back. Now, to be clear, Silicon Valley Bank is a huge bank, and its customers include individuals as well as household names you may know, like Airbnb, Pinterest, Cisco. And this is a way bigger story. The entire banking industry is feeling the impact. U.S. banks at one point had lost over $100 billion in stock market value in just 2 days. And there are fears now that this could spread beyond banking to other parts of the economy.
Well, it looks like they're not wasting any time in escalating this financial crisis. If you watched the last series on what happens at the end of the Bible, maybe right now you can better understand why Yah placed that topic in such a high priority for me to communicate. We are approaching the time of transition in this world, where everyone will be affected. You can probably feel it and see it for yourself by now. And the focus of that last series was for you to focus on the promises and not about all the events that could bring fear and anxiety. If you've been following this channel over the years, none of what is currently happening should be new or surprising to you. In fact, it is my sincere hope that while many of you heard about this banking collapse, you are already built up in enough understanding of what is to come that you're able to move in strength, not fear, while all of this propaganda and the narratives are forming. Over the years, I have made so much content on explaining the coming economic collapse that I often feel like I don't need to expound on these things anymore. But as these events have been transpiring, I realize that it may be difficult for people to see through the narratives that come through the mainstream versus understanding the overall agenda. Last week, there were many comments asking that this banking collapse be discussed. And so I wanted to make sure that we covered it, so that no believer is led by fear or moving according to the way that the world desires you to move. Be very clear that what is happening right now is an agenda of fear that will lead the world into a new financial system. If you do not focus on the narrative more than you simply understand the agenda, you will not be moved by them. The masses that are asleep are being made to be led through fear. Those that are attached to this world and their possessions will be led into darkness. Be clear on that. Those that are awake and live in trust in Yah will be led into the fulfillment of Yah's promise for all of us, being led into his kingdom, which we thoroughly discussed in that last series. If you can understand how wonderful Yah's timing is, you can see how through that last series, he has decided to comfort us with understanding of what is to come through his promises, not being led by fear about all those other events that will happen to everyone else. Through understanding the wonderfulness of end times Bible prophecy, he has directed us to not live through fear of what is to come, but to hold on to his promises with hope and trust in him. If from the last series you understand more about Bible prophecy and Yah's coming kingdom, your role now is to be one who lives in truth and depends on Yah to bring you through it all. Now, that does not mean that you will not be tested and that the devil is not going to try to provoke you through fear. No. These things will come at you, but you have been built up to be set free from this world system and the direction that it is taking the masses that have not made Yahuwah their focus. This banking collapse is a very important leg to their takeover, but there's a lot more to come. I want to make sure that all believers have proper understanding of what they are seeing. So we're going to discuss what has happened over the past week or so, along with what else is to come. If you are a Kodashim, a set-apart one, who is obedient to Yahuwah and holds the testimony of Yahusha, you have nothing to fear. This banking collapse is the beginning of the separation of kingdoms. It is the satanic kingdom versus Yah's kingdom. While all this is unraveling, It may be a little unsettling as the world as we know it is about to change. But if you hold onto your faith and trust in Yahuwah, you will come out of this refined as gold, able to obtain the promises he has for those who love him. So let's understand the banking collapse and how believers should react to it. Let's begin.
News today that reminded so many of us of the unsettling times that came with those banking failures back in 2008. Tonight, a bank has been seized by state and federal regulators. This is the biggest bank failure since 2008, and this evening, so many customers demanding to know, where is our money? Now, this bank, the Silicon Valley Bank, a favorite of the tech industry. Customers today rushing to withdraw their money, finding branch offices closed and ATMs not working. Tonight here, the White House is pressed. Could other banks be next, and what safeguards are in place?
Okay, so first thing, I would recommend, if you don't have an understanding of finance and economics, to not follow the mainstream media as they discuss what is happening. Like, if you now see that there's a problem and then you just go to the news to see what is happening, you can be misdirected and misguided. Like, for example, I have family that have ignored most of my warnings about the world. And as these events have happened, I asked them if they heard about it. At first they said no, because they do not follow what is happening in the world. But sometime after, they went to the news to find out what's going on. And when they do that, they are just regurgitating the narrative that the mainstream media is giving them, which is now making them just a puppet, speaking thoughts that the media has given them to think on the subject. But what they don't realize is that what they're saying out their mouths about what they think is happening is not necessarily the truth. It's just how the media wants you to believe is the truth. So just using them as an example, my advice to all is to not follow the mainstream media, because their job is not to inform you, but to indoctrinate you into following their narrative. Now, I do recognize that this may be hard for those that have just come into the truth. But please understand that if you're just waking up, your best bet is to avoid the media and understand these things from views outside the mainstream. So in watching this video, I'm not going to regurgitate all the same information the media has been giving you for the past week or more. I don't care about their narrative and how they say we got here. I don't care about any of that. The point you need to understand is that this is not by accident. It is carefully planned and calculated. So what's the end goal? This video will speak to the financial aspect of the agenda. It's to move the world from the current financial system with paper fiat currency to a digital financial system with digital currencies on the blockchain, cryptocurrencies. The end goal is a complete change of the financial system where all money will be digital. We will first be going to central bank digital currencies. But I don't want to get ahead of myself here. That's where we're going, and everything that is happening is to provoke people by fear and panic so they can be herded into the new system. If you attach to their narrative, you will be attached to their plans. So, with all that said, if you really want to understand what has been happening, we actually need to go backwards. So the first thing you might want to understand is that right now, they're labeling this as a banking collapse. But again, this is the mainstream narrative to keep you out of line with what is really occurring. Yes, banking is a problem, but it is not the problem. The problem actually is with debt. This is a debt crisis. And being that banks are on the front lines of debt, this crisis is being attached to them so that people still are not completely free and they still make the hole deeper with debt. I've made a great deal of videos about debt for a long time, so I will not go over it in great detail in this video. I'll just give an overview. This all started after the financial collapse of 2008. This is when the housing collapse caused a Great Recession, and in order to stop a full collapse of the system, the government engaged in bailouts, 0% interest rates, and quantitative easing. For many of you that are in your 20s and your 30s, you may not understand any of this because you were a child when all of this was going on. But everything that happened in 2008 was a big deal that brought you to where you are right now. So if you don't understand what happened at that point, you can't really understand where you are right now. So if you don't understand what happened in 2008, please do not feel that you have a good take and understanding of what is happening in the world as you live in it today. Just need to make that clear to the younger ones. But like I was saying, since that period in 2008, we have had about 12 years of rate at 0%, which means that the world has been borrowing money for free for more than a decade. And from this, the debt levels of the world have run up drastically. And while the debt levels were also going up, they destroyed the value of the currencies of the world because they were able to print money without consequence. The United States, above all, was able to do this because they have the world reserve currency. So they were able to print the most. And then to keep up, the other central banks of the world printed as well. Basically, what I'm explaining is that since 2008, the debt levels of the world have been driven up dramatically without real consequence. And the economies of the world have benefited because when they were in need, they could borrow money for free. That's the simple way of saying it. And so before we get to this present day where we are right now, you need to know that what happened in 2020 escalated everything even more. There were many different agendas that were accomplished during COVID, but we will focus on the one that is spoken about the least, which is the explosion in debt. It was actually 3 years ago, March 13th of 2020, in which I made this video, which explained this even before COVID really took off and they achieved all their other agendas. This video was What They Aren't Telling You. This is all about debt. And if you rewatch it, the video aged well. If you feel you are behind on this subject, then go back to this video and watch it next. This is why I say that if you have been following these videos over the years, none of this should surprise you. In that video, I explained the debt bubble and how they would use COVID to drastically increase the size of the debt bubble. And over the 3 years since that video, that is precisely what has happened. So what has happened is that debt levels have increased to ridiculous levels, and after 2022, when the Federal Reserve increased rates from 0% to 4% in 1 year, one of the fastest rate hikes in history, the world that has been addicted to free money is now having to pay for it, and now everything is coming to a complete halt. They manipulated the economy for over a decade with free money, getting people to adapt to a business model that was able to grow because of free, cheap money. And by consequence, this increased debt to levels the world has never seen before. And then it devalued the currency so that inflation is just as much a problem as debt is. And so now the central banks have to decide which problem they want to solve. But they cannot fix both. No matter what, we have a problem on our hands. And that is where we are right now. That is an oversimplified breakdown of the issue. So why do they do all this? For many people who live in the matrix, they actually believe that these governments and leaders actually care about the people, and they are all about making the world a better place. But if you are a Kodashim, which means a set apart one, you should understand that that is a very naive way of viewing this world. The reality is that they have been working on an agenda of bringing the world together on the same path, so like dominoes, when one nation falls, they all fall after one another. They have been working to link the world financial system together so that it is all attached, so they won't have independent outlier nations not being affected by the troubles of the world. Everyone will be affected. They have been working on an agenda to completely link the world together so that they can make the system fall altogether, and then together they rebuild it stronger afterwards.
Everything they built will fall! And from the ashes of their world, we'll build a better one!
We knew that despite all the diplomacy and the handshaking and the rhetoric, that to build a really better world sometimes means having to tear the old one down.
And while they've been working on doing that, they have been aggressively attacking our values and our morals so that the world is more satanically led with a value system of do what thou wilt, do what you want. They have been attacking our values and our morals while attacking the system that has been made to be the foundation of everyone's world. This is what they've been doing and what they've been taking so long to build. The only people that will not be affected by all this will be the set apart ones, grounded in Yah's word and trusting in Yahuwah's promises, those that have made his kingdom and his system our foundation. But this is what we all been seeing, and so this brings me back to the beginning about following the mainstream media and their narrative. Because if you do not have this major understanding of the devil and the details behind this mainstream narrative, you will fall for their agenda and not realize that this is all happening by design, not by mistakes or simple oversights. This is by design. The world is being steered into a new system, and it will only be those solidified in their faith in Yah that will come out of it whole when everything is said and done. If you've been planning a life that's surrounded by debt, your mortgages or your student loans or loans for businesses, all those things about loans, you've been attaching your life to a system of debt that will fail. The plan is not sound. And that is why it's important to live in reality and not by following the ways of this world. But I digress. Let's look at what's happening. Over the past week, we had about 4 banks fail.
The abrupt closures of 3 banks in a matter of days that are now sending shockwaves across sectors of the economy and raising concerns about the U.S. banking system. It started last week with Silvergate Capital, a big player in the crypto industry. That market's recent collapse caused many of the bank's large customers to take out their money. Silvergate announced it would close its doors and sell whatever assets it had left. At the end of the week, those with large deposits in Silicon Valley Bank made big withdrawals based on fears SVB was running out of enough money to cover deposits. The fear fed on itself, and by Friday, the 16th largest bank in the nation could not keep up with the withdrawals and was seized by California regulators. Just 2 days later, New York State regulators shuttered Signature Bank, another victim of the crypto plunge. The volatile situation sent the stock prices of several banks plunging Monday as regulators moved to keep bank depositors from banks that are still open from losing faith in the wake of Silicon Valley Bank's collapse.
Now, there is a 4th bank, First Republic Bank, that they are conveniently leaving out of mainstream attention right now. But it's still right in the mix. And then we had Biden come on and tell everyone it's all good, that our money's all safe, telling us that the banking system is safe and protected. Why? Because they're protecting it.
Today, thanks to the quick action of my administration over the past few days, Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them. Small businesses across the country, the deposit accounts at these banks can breathe easier knowing they'll be able to pay their workers and pay their bills. And their hardworking employees can breathe easier as well. Last week, when we learned of the problems of the banks and the impact they could have on jobs of small businesses and banking system overall, I instructed my team to act quickly to protect these interests. They've done that. They've done that.
And so, again, as I have repeatedly been saying, it's all about who you trust and who you believe in. Most people in this world, even though they don't want to believe in this obviously not well man, they want to believe in the system, so they will believe him. But those who believe in Yah and understand the word, they know that the system has to collapse so that the world can move forward into judgment. No one's money is safe unless you're at the top of the class. And even these people, the kings of the earth, will only be safe for a short period of time. But here is what is not being said. While they're saying that your money is safe, they're not calling it a bailout. They still are bailing out these banks. They say it's not a bailout because they say it's not taxpayer money, but it's corporations' monies that are propping up these banks. But it's semantics. They don't want to say bailout, but they're doing a bailout. These banks are being bailed out currently. Listen.
It was a weekend that reminded a lot of folks of the troubling times, the tumultuous times of the great financial crisis. Regulators scrambling to shore up a fragile banking system, taking several historic steps to avoid a banking crisis. Investors asking themselves this morning, did they succeed? The failure Friday of Silicon Valley Bank, it was the 2nd largest failure in U.S. history, what some call the first bank run of the digital age because the concern was created by tweets. It created the risk of a broader run on small and regional banks throughout the country, and that companies with their money in SVB wouldn't be able to operate or make payroll this morning. Looks like now none of that's going to happen, with a caveat, Andrew, a source of mine telling me it's not always that smooth. So here's what officials did. They guaranteed deposit at SVB. They shut down Signature Bank. Also, as Becky said earlier, there's new financing at First Republic. You can be sure regulators made that happen. They guaranteed all uninsured deposits, folks. If you're uninsured at a bank, you're guaranteed, at least for a period of time here. And they created a new Federal Reserve Fund that will finance bank assets. They eased lending rules at the emergency discount window to make it less expensive to borrow there. Officials said they took these actions to avert a situation where uninsured depositors would pull their money from essentially healthy banks, and the nation's deposits ended up only in big banks. They insisted the banking system is strong and well capitalized.
You see, what they have said might have gone over your heads if you're not familiar with a lot of their terminology and those actions. but let's just keep it simple. If people didn't lose their money, even though the bank doesn't have their money, it's because the government has stepped in to make sure that no one loses their money. And that is called a bailout. These banks that failed don't have the customer's money. So the government is providing the liquidity for these banks. And believe me, this is the same for all banking, especially in the United States. The banks don't have your money. They loan it out and do whatever they want with it. That's how banking works. And what happens with these bailouts is that these companies, these banks, they get rewarded for gambling with your money because they're not really actually holding your money in the banks. This is an illusion. But again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. What I'm trying to say is that the government has been bailing out these banks so far. In a free market, the way the market is supposed to work is that when there's problems, you let these banks or these companies fail and let the market sort itself out. But what the government has been doing since 2008 is not letting anyone fail. You remember those words, too big to fail. They say that's too big to fail because it's going to affect everyone, and they don't want that to happen. So they just make the problem bigger and bigger, kicking the can down the road until the whole system implodes because they can't save the system forever. Eventually, even if they did do that, it goes back to the dollar because all they're doing is continuously printing dollars and dollars, saying that they're going to provide liquidity. But when they do that, they're pumping more money into the system, which increases inflation and devalues your currency. This never fixes anything. This is what I'm trying to say. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me slow down. As a part of their narrative, the whole United States banking system has been given a negative outlook by Moody's rating agency.
Moody's Investor Service downgraded the entire U.S. banking system from stable to negative on Tuesday, citing a rapidly deteriorating environment. And the White House is monitoring other mid-sized and smaller banks for signs of weakness 3 days after the collapse of Silicon Valley and Signature banks.
As it was explained in this CNBC News article, in its downgrade of the entire sector, the rating agency noted the extraordinary actions taken to shore up impacted banks. But it said other institutions with unrealized losses or uninsured depositors still could be at risk. We expect pressures to persist and be exacerbated by ongoing monetary policy tightening, with interest rates likely to remain higher for longer until inflation returns to within the Fed's target range, Moody's said. U.S. banks also now are facing sharply rising deposit costs after years of low funding costs, which will reduce earnings at banks, particularly those with a greater proportion of fixed-rate assets. The firm said it expects the United States economy to fall into recession later this year, further pressuring the industry. They keep telling us they expect problems on the way, but most people still are not ready for it. Either way, the banking system is under attack, and this is all a part of the overall agenda that is coming into view. But what does this mean for all of us? It all depends on how tightly you are held to this world, because what they want is for people to run in fear. The same as what happened with COVID, they want people to move in fear. So what will probably happen is an escalation of this banking crisis all the way until people are moved into complete fear and panic and bank runs start. They want people to take their money out the banks because it will greatly reduce their conversions into the central bank digital currencies. And it will also be a scapegoat for the coming collapse. They'll blame us for taking the money out. But if you understand where this world is going, you don't have to fall for these fake narratives and these lies. Please know and understand that the next system has already been built. I've explained this thoroughly in my What to Expect in 2023 video. Right now, you're just seeing a prelude to it all. You're seeing the buildup of it. This banking crisis leads to the new narrative for the central bank digital currencies to be introduced once the full collapse happens. Once everybody loses everything, they will find a new way to introduce the new system. So in the meantime, until we get to that, everyone will be provoked by fear and worry about their financial future and their money. And this is one way that the wheat will be again separated from the tares. For the people that have placed their hope and trust in their finances while still proclaiming their faith in Yah, your faith is going to be tested. Those who are worrying about what they're going to lose and what will happen with their money and their possessions, Most of them will go right along with where the system is taking everyone else. And that is why it is so important to have the proper perspective on what is going on and know exactly who sustains you. If you're scared or worried about losing everything, not only is that going to happen to you, but you're also going to be led by fear right into a satanic agenda and the traps by the enemy. Let me tell you that as these things are happening, you should only be focusing on Yah and making sure you have been building your faith up in Him, building your trust up in Him. Everything you have and own is temporary. You're not taking it with you. If you're not willing to walk away from it all, then you're not ready for what's coming. But let's continue. I believe the next leg of this banking crisis will start from what happens with Credit Suisse Bank. But right now you have other banks already talking about bailing them out too. But that bank has been in the news for a few years speaking about their problems. So it wouldn't surprise me if they use them as a scapegoat. But either way, what we know is that one of these banks will be like a Lehman Brothers and they will let it fail and it will send ripples throughout the banking industry, prompting a collapse. They are just introducing the problem, but it doesn't mean that we're fully there yet. It doesn't mean that they're ready to make the full scapegoat for a collapse just yet. They're just telling us and showing us one main problem that will have to be dealt with in the Great Reset, which is the banking system. You see, the banking system, it has to go. And if you already understood where this world was going, this would already be an expectation for you, well before these problems started coming online. If you understand cryptocurrencies, you understand that in the new system, there will be no need for banks to hold your money. They might offer loan products, but they will not work in the same way that we know them today as the holders and fiduciaries of our money. You don't need banks in a cryptocurrency economic system. It's peer-to-peer, business-to-peer. You don't need intermediaries. You don't need banks in the middle. The fall of banks is inevitable in a cryptocurrency economic system. But the thing is that people still don't understand crypto, so they just don't get it. But if you know where the world is going, then you understand what has to happen. And these games and narratives are not for you. This is why it's always best to detach from this world. They have a lot of different agendas on the table. I mean, at this same time that they're discussing this banking crisis, the Pentagon is also saying that an alien mothership in our solar system could send mini probes to Earth.
Any spy balloon or whatever else U.S. fighter jet shot down last month? Tonight, out of Harvard University, a draft paper about mysterious flying objects sounding almost like science fiction.
Loeb teamed up with the Pentagon office that investigates unidentified aerial phenomenon, and they released this draft report that indicates it is possible that alien ships have already visited our solar system.
Yeah. Or did you forget that a Russian jet recently collided with a United States drone?
First, we want to bring you the latest on what we know about a dangerous aerial encounter in the sky today between the United States and Russia. The Pentagon saying a Russian fighter jet poured fuel on an unmanned American drone, then collided with it over the Black Sea. It sent the American aircraft into the water. The confrontation escalating already high tensions between the countries, which are telling different versions of today's event.
Or what about China now stepping things up a notch and saying if the United States does not change their ways, we're all headed into conflict?
如果美方不踩刹车，继续沿着错误的道路狂飙下去，再多的护栏也挡不住脱轨翻车，陷入对抗冲突。
We've never heard them talk like that. And do you know what is still lingering over our heads, but they just don't really report on it right now? They'll report on it when they're ready to. The United States still has not passed anything about the debt ceiling, and they have already said if they do not pass the debt ceiling by early June, the United States would default, and that would be a catastrophe.
The U.S. might soon be unable to borrow money to pay its bills. Today, in a letter to Congress, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the U.S. could hit its debt limit by next Thursday, January 19th. Yellen told House Speaker Kevin McCarthy that the Treasury will have to take extraordinary measures to avoid a default. She warned that with no action, the U.S. could default on its debt by early June.
All right, Elizabeth, let's first start with the White House and just trying to reach a deal here, and if you think it's even possible at this point.
Look here, the White House says that it's trying to reach out to lawmakers from both sides of the aisle to come to a bipartisan agreement to either suspend or raise that $31 trillion debt limit. That would mean that the government can keep borrowing money, can stop with the risk of a default, can keep paying all of the obligations that it needs. And we're talking about obligations. It's important to remember, we're talking about payments for Social Security, for Medicare. These are day-to-day payments that the government has already committed to. These are bills it already owes. But the White House is saying it's not willing to compromise to the point that it's going to attach any sort of other spending cuts to this agreement. And basically, that's what Republicans want. They say that they're not going to raise that limit until there are also an agreement in Congress to cut spending, to cut the government's expenses. So both sides really digging in here. Neither side so far showing that they're willing to compromise. So there's this game of chicken going on, and it is pretty, the stakes are pretty high here when we're talking about what's at stake.
So I show all of this to show you that there is a lot on the table and things are not de-escalating, but continuously getting worse. Next week, the Fed will make its decision on rates. And no matter what they do, it has consequences. I mean, lowering rates or the pace of rate increases, lowering that, it means that they're reversing course on dealing with inflation. And that is probably more catastrophic than continuing to raise rates. Even though raising rates just adds more pressure on the banking sector and the economy as a whole, like I read in that article. The point I'm making to everyone is that if you have been living under a rock in your own reality, trying to ignore the world around you while forcing your own will and forcing your own goals to manifest, you, yes you, are going to be taken down in this great reset. All of this has been planned long before you started creating your goals. Because you have attached your life to this system, you will go down with it as well. You've dedicated your life to a system for the dead. Now that's not me, that's Lauryn Hill. But what she meant by that line is that your life is dedicated to a system for those whose relationship with the Most High is spiritually dead. This system is made for those that are on the opposite side of Yahuwah, and those attached to it will fall right along with it. You are being set up to be taken down. And when you lose everything, and everyone else you know loses everything, you will look for the system to fix things and make things whole for you. And at that point, you'll be led right into the trap that they are laying for you. It's because you are not focused on Yah, but you've been focusing on yourself, making yourself an idol, being led into the traps of the enemy. Now let's be clear. Do I know when the collapse will happen? Absolutely not. I mean, I do have expectations, but my timings are always off. I just know that being ready for it and not following their plans have left my family in a better situation than tying ourselves to their system. It provides peace while others are being driven in fear and anxiety. Let me tell you, living in truth makes you walk a lot stronger than those who follow the lies. And it is in all of your best interest to attach yourself to Yah and submit to His will and live for His kingdom, because this world is about to be reset and set on fire, and judgment is coming for the nations. You do not want to be a part of it. If you're worried about losing everything, listen, you've already lost. You need a mindset shift, and you need to fully tie yourself to Messiah, not religion, but relationship. Yahusha spoke directly about this, and if you understand how wonderful and powerful His words are, this will bless you. These words that He said meant so much to me during the times of COVID. And as I see these agendas forming, they still hold dear to me to this day. Matthew chapter 16, verses 24 through 26. Yahusha said to His disciples, "If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul?" You see, during the times of COVID, the majority were trying to save their life. And by trying to save their life, they gave themselves up to agendas that were actually against their life, putting unknown substances in their body because they thought they were saving their life. But today, we see that many of those who made those decisions made the wrong choice. I'm not trying to go into debate about this in the comments. But listen, if you do recognize you made the wrong choice during that period, don't dwell on it. Just repent on it and be thankful you are still in the age of forgiveness. You are able to be forgiven. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to go through something because of your decision, but you are forgiven by it. The point I am making is that those who try to save their lives will lose it, but those who lose their life for his sake will find it. As he said, it doesn't profit us to gain the world and lose our soul. So rather than worrying about all this that we can lose in this coming reset, get to a point where you do not care what happens to these earthly possessions. This world is much more than these earthly possessions that we obtain, and being in America can often make lose sight of it, because obtaining possessions is what being an American is all about, unfortunately. But if you make this world and all that it offers be the whole point of you being alive, you will lose your soul. If what you have is so important that you will do anything to keep it and not lose it, you are an idolater and you will not see the kingdom of heaven. I have to make it plain to you. Messiah said, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. So listen, if all that you have acquired in your life is in your mind to preserve, you have left yourself vulnerable to the enemy. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where thieves cannot break in and steal, and moth and rust cannot destroy. What he's saying is, all your clothes, your home, your money, your electronics, all your possessions, all that should not be your treasures. And if you're worried about losing it, you need to shift your way of thinking, because I can promise you, you are going to lose it anyway. They said you will own nothing and be happy. So it's not about whether you're going to lose it. It's what you give up for it that will actually matter. Now let me also speak to this. Those who wonder about what you will do in the collapse and how you will be and how you will eat, I cannot tell each of you what will happen specifically in your lives. All I can tell you is what Messiah told us and how he told us to be in Matthew chapter 6 again, 25 through 34. Therefore, I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Which of you, by worrying, can add 1 cubit to his stature? So why do you worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. And yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Now if Elohim so clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore, do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For after all these things the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. It's truly wonderful how Messiah has spoken to us long before we ever existed and told us how we need to be and how we need to react to these things coming. I sincerely recommend that you apply these words that Messiah has said, apply them to your life, and live accordingly to them. Don't say out of your mouth you love Messiah and that you follow him, but then you can't trust in him and you need to know what's going to happen here and what's going to happen there. If you trust in him, you trust that he will provide for you. And listen, I get it. Sometimes we own things to place ourselves in certain positions in this world. We wear certain clothes to place ourselves in certain positions in this world. But in this coming reset, in this coming world that is changing, none of what we own or what we wear or where we currently live will matter. So don't worry about the treasures you have accumulated or that you've been trying to accumulate. Focus on Messiah and live according to all he has said. Follow Yah's laws, commandments, and statutes. Serve him with joy and gladness of heart. Now let me just say, As these things happen, I will not respond to everything that has taken place. I feel I have made a lot of content that has explained these things, and we cannot and should not move according to their narratives and the agendas. If you're already in the truth, none of this that has been happening should be surprising to you, and you should already be ready for it spiritually and mentally. Those who have been following these videos over the past years should already feel ready for what is happening, and you should have peace. Everything is changing soon, including the coming changes to YouTube and social media with Section 230. So before this world shifts and everything changes, it is imperative for us to focus more on the truth rather than always responding to their lies and their narrative. They want us focused on their agendas and their distractions so that we're following them and align more with them more than following Yah and what Yah is doing. So I will not let that be with this ministry. But being that what is happening is such a huge leg in the agenda I have been speaking about for years, I wanted to make sure that there was clarity given. And there is no better clarity that I can give than this, and I will end with it. If you are quota Sheen, a set apart one, set yourself apart from all these agendas and focus on Yahuwah to fulfill all his promises in his word. Yes, the world is going to go through major problems, but it will be your faith and trust in Yah that separates you from everyone else. Do not worry about the banking crisis, the dollar crisis, the debt crisis, the alien crisis, war and geopolitical conflict. None of that should matter to set apart ones. We are waiting for Yah's kingdom, so we know that the world must go through these trials and tests, but they are not for those who belong to Yah. So make sure you belong to Yahuwah. Repent, submit, and obey. Be forgiven and be ready. These days belong to us for our betterment and for us to move into Yah's coming kingdom. We have glorious days ahead, so do not be distracted, fearful, or worried by these coming trials. Just focus on Yah. My brothers and sisters, be ready and be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please make sure to like it and share it with others. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to this channel. Yah willing, I upload every Friday. Don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on the website. If for any reason you do not see this channel any longer, you can always find this ministry on Truthunedited.com. Please make sure you subscribe to the email list to always stay connected. Please continue to pray for this ministry. Your prayers and support are sincerely appreciated. As always, thank you to those who donate to this ministry. Please know your contribution is a huge blessing to this ministry and helps me continue on with the assignment given. Your support is a blessing, and I'm always humbled by it. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again everyone for watching. I love you all.
What is your profession?
The adversary of this world are ready to die to take away our freedom. Chronicle Nation, what is your profession? What is your profession?